Let me start with a question. How many times have you ignored that little voice inside you, only to regret it later? Maybe it was when you felt you shouldn't trust a business partner, or when you knew you should have taken that opportunity, but fear held you back. We all have those stories. And Florence Scovel Shinn, a great spiritual teacher of the early 1900s, said something powerful. Intuition is a spiritual faculty and does not explain, but simply points the way. Think about that for a moment. Doesn't explain. Points the way. Like a compass in your soul. Intuition is not magic. It is your inner wealth GPS. You see, your conscious mind works with logic. But your intuition taps into something bigger. A wisdom beyond your limited thoughts. It's like Wi-Fi. You can't see it, but if you connect, you have unlimited access. Now imagine having that connection guiding every decision you make about money, opportunities, and people. Wouldn't that multiply your wealth? Let me give you a real example. I once met a man who had 2 job offers. One offered security, average pay, and a clear path. The other was risky, uncertain, but something in his gut told him, take it. He ignored his intuition. He chose the safe job. 2 years later, the risky company he turned down grew into a billion-dollar business. Friends, the cost of ignoring intuition is far greater than the risk of following it. Let me ask you, do you think Thomas Edison invented the light bulb by logic alone? Do you think Henry Ford built his empire by only following statistics? Well, they followed hunches, inner nudges, wild ideas others laughed at. Intuition built empires. Intuition changed history. Now, how does this apply to you? Your intuition is like radar. It warns you of wrong deals, highlights the right investments. It whispers when to act and when to wait. Have you ever noticed? When you ignore it, things fall apart. When you follow it, doors open effortlessly. That's not an accident. That is spiritual law. Florence Scovel Shinn called it the divine intelligence guiding us. Let's make it personal. Close your eyes for a second and remember a time you trusted your gut. Maybe you avoided a bad purchase. Maybe you met someone who changed your life. Maybe you made a bold decision and it paid off. That feeling, that knowing was not luck. It was your wealth multiplying power in action. So how do we tap into it? Silence the noise. Money loves clarity. If your mind is full of fear and doubt, you can't hear intuition. Quickly. When intuition speaks, it often comes as a flash. Don't overthink. Overthinking kills wealth. Trust small, then big. Start by following your intuition in small choices. Buying something, calling someone. You'll see it works. Then apply it to bigger money decisions. Friends, wealth is not just numbers in a bank. Wealth is alignment with your inner compass. It is following the quiet voice that says, this is the way. And when you listen, you won't just add wealth. You'll multiply it, instantly, effortlessly, spiritually. So I leave you with this question. Will you ignore your intuition? Or will you trust it and step into a life of limitless wealth? The choice is yours. Thank you. Key takeaways. Intuition is your inner GPS for wealth. It guides better than logic alone. Ignoring intuition often leads to missed opportunities and regret. History's greatest innovators relied on intuition as much as reason. Intuition acts like financial radar, pointing you toward the right deals and away from the wrong ones. To strengthen intuition, silence your mind, act quickly, and build trust step by step. Following intuition aligns you with divine intelligence, opening the flow of wealth instantly. Let me take you deeper into the first point. Intuition is your inner GPS for wealth. And imagine I'm sitting across from you, telling you a story that feels as real as the moment you're living right now. Think about the last time you used a GPS while driving. You put in the destination, and all you had to do was follow the voice. You didn't argue with it. You didn't need to know every turn before you began. You trusted that if you stayed on the road, you'd arrive. Now, imagine life is the journey, and wealth, whether financial, emotional, or spiritual, is the destination. Your intuition is that invisible GPS inside you, quietly giving directions. But here's the thing. Unlike the GPS on your phone, it doesn't shout, it doesn't recalculate loudly, it doesn't flash on a screen. It whispers. And when you're distracted, when you're drowning in noise, when you're buried under fear, you miss the instructions. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "Intuition is a spiritual faculty and does not explain, but simply points the way." That one line is like gold. It tells us intuition doesn't give a PowerPoint presentation, it doesn't list pros and cons, it doesn't justify itself. Simply nudges. Have you felt that? That tug in your heart saying, "Don't go there." Or that sudden spark in your mind saying, "Call this person now." And then, when you listened, it felt almost magical, as if the universe rearranged itself to support you. But when you ignored it, oh, the regret. You replayed the moment and thought, "I knew it. I should have listened." Picture a woman standing at a crossroad of two opportunities. One is steady, predictable, safe. The other looks uncertain, risky, with no clear guarantees. Her friends all tell her, "Choose the safe path. Don't gamble." Her mind screams logic. What if it fails? But in her gut something stirs. A voice she can't explain says, "This is your path." She takes the leap of faith. And years later, that decision doesn't just give her money. It gives her freedom, fulfillment, and joy. That's intuition at work. Logic will always lead you to what others can see. Intuition leads you to what only you are meant to see. I once heard a story about a man who bought a tiny piece of land no one cared about. Everyone mocked him. "Why waste your money? There's nothing there." But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to buy it. Something inside insisted. Years later, oil was discovered on that very land. Do you think logic could have predicted that? Well, logic would have dismissed it. But intuition, his wealth GPS, knew. It knew what he couldn't see. And that decision changed his life forever. Now let's flip it. Imagine someone who ignored their inner compass. A young entrepreneur feels uneasy about signing a contract. Everything on paper looks good. The investors are smiling, the numbers add up, the deal looks golden. But every night before bed, he has a knot in his stomach. Something whispers, "Don't sign." He pushes it aside because logic says otherwise. Signs. Months later, the company collapses, and he loses everything. And in the silence after the storm, he whispers to himself, "I knew it. Felt it. Why didn't I listen?" That's the tragedy of ignoring intuition. It's not that we didn't know, it's that we knew and refused to trust. And wealth, real wealth, isn't only about grabbing every opportunity. It's about recognizing which opportunities carry light and which are traps. Your intuition already knows the difference. History is filled with examples of intuition being the invisible hand behind great wealth. Think of Steve Jobs. He once said, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become." Jobs didn't follow market research to create the iPhone. Logic would have told him, "People are fine with their current phones." Intuition whispered a vision of the future. He trusted it. And that trust built one of the most valuable companies in the world. But intuition isn't just for billionaires or inventors. It's for you, for me, for everyone. Imagine you're walking through a market. Dozens of shops, hundreds of choices. Something inside tells you to pause at a little corner stall. You have no idea why. You walk over, and the shop owner mentions an opportunity, a connection, a piece of advice that shifts your entire path. That one whisper, that one nudge, becomes the seed of wealth in your life. That's how it works. It doesn't explain, doesn't justify, simply points. And let me tell you why intuition works so perfectly. Your conscious mind can only hold a limited amount of information. Processes what you see, what you hear, what you analyze. But intuition pulls from a much deeper well. The subconscious, the collective, the divine intelligence Florence spoke about. It's like being in a dark room with a candle. Your logic lights up a few feet around you. But intuition, it opens the window and lets in the sunlight. Suddenly, the whole room is visible. And once you see, you can't unsee. But here's the challenge. We live in a world that worships logic and mocks intuition. From a young age we are told, be reasonable, don't follow feelings, stick to facts. Yet some of the greatest wealth builders in history were the ones who dared to trust that inner compass. Henry Ford said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." Logic said horses. Intuition said automobiles. He trusted it, and the world changed forever. So, think of intuition as the silent business partner you've always had but often ignored. It doesn't shout, but it's always guiding. It's that GPS inside you saying, "Turn left. Stop here. Move now." When you ignore it, you drift off course, sometimes painfully. But when you listen, you arrive exactly where wealth is waiting. The key is practice. The more you follow your intuition, the clearer its voice becomes. It's like tuning a radio. First there's static. But once you lock into the right frequency, the music is crystal clear. Wealth flows the same way. The static of fear, doubt, and overthinking blocks the signal. But when you quiet the noise and listen deeply, you hear it, the guidance that can multiply your wealth instantly, not because money rains from the sky, but because you are led to the right place at the right time with the right decision. And maybe that's the real secret Florence wanted us to grasp. You don't need to chase wealth. You don't need to struggle endlessly. You only need to follow the inner compass that already knows the fastest route to your abundance. Because while logic measures the road ahead, intuition already sees the destination. Let me take you on a journey into the heart of the first point, that intuition is your inner GPS for wealth. And I want you to feel this not as an idea, but as something alive, something that speaks directly to you. Imagine for a moment that you're in an unfamiliar city. The streets are crowded, the lights are bright, and every corner looks the same. You don't know where to go, but in your hand is a GPS. All you have to do is type in the destination, and suddenly a calm voice begins to guide you. You don't need to see the whole map, you don't need to know every turn, you just need to trust that voice and move one step at a time. That's exactly what your intuition is doing every single day. But unlike the GPS on your phone, it doesn't scream or flash in neon signs. It whispers, nudges, simply points the way. Florence Scovel Shinn once said, "Intuition is a spiritual faculty and does not explain, but simply points the way." That statement holds a universe inside it. Intuition doesn't come with a manual, it doesn't argue with you, it doesn't give you the pros and cons on paper. It appears as a feeling, a knowing, a quiet conviction that you cannot explain but somehow trust. And wealth, whether it is financial wealth, opportunities, or the richness of meaningful connections, responds to intuition faster than logic can ever imagine. Let me give you a scene to picture. A young man sits at his desk staring at two envelopes. One contains an offer for a safe, steady job, one that everyone in his family tells him to take. The other holds the details of a startup offer. Less money, no guarantees, but something about it makes his heart race. He can't explain it, he can't prove it, but something inside tells him, this is it. He hesitates. He asks his friends and they say, be smart. Don't take risks. He asks his parents and they plead, choose security. His mind shouts logic, but his gut whispers destiny. Now imagine if he listens to his intuition. That little company grows, transforms, becomes something world-changing. His decision doesn't just make him wealthy, it makes him fulfilled. And if he had ignored it, he would spend his life replaying that moment, saying the most painful words anyone can say. I knew it, felt it, but I didn't listen. That's the power of intuition. It knows before logic catches up. It sees before the eyes can. And history is full of examples. Think of Henry Ford. He once said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Logic said horses. Intuition whispered cars. He trusted the whisper, and that trust built an empire. Think of Steve Jobs. He stood on stages and said, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. He didn't build Apple by surveys and statistics alone. He followed flashes of insight that others thought were crazy, but those whispers became iPhones, iPads, devices that changed the way we live. But let's bring it closer to you, to the little decisions you face every day. Maybe you're about to invest in something and on paper it looks amazing, but something inside you feels tight, uneasy, almost like your stomach is warning you. That is your wealth GPS saying, "Don't take that road." Or maybe you get an idea at 3 a.m., one of those thoughts that jolts you awake, and your heart feels alive at the possibility. That's not random. That's intuition saying, "This is your turn. Move now." The tragedy is that we've been trained to silence it. From childhood we were told, be practical, be logical, stick to facts. But facts are limited. Logic is based only on what has already happened. Intuition, on the other hand, taps into the unseen, the possibility, the future waiting to unfold. It's like standing in a dark room with a candle. Logic shows you what's within the candle's glow. Intuition opens the window and lets in the sun. Suddenly, the whole room is visible, and you wonder why you ever thought the candle was enough. I remember hearing a story about a farmer who was offered a piece of land. Everyone mocked him for even considering it. "It's barren," they said. "There's nothing there." But his intuition wouldn't let go. It whispered, "Buy it." He bought it, ignored the laughter, and years later, oil was discovered beneath the soil. He became a wealthy man, not because logic told him so, but because he trusted the unseen signal inside. That's how intuition multiplies wealth. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't need permission. It already knows. But intuition doesn't only save us from loss or guide us to riches. It also creates alignment, a flow where things seem to fall into place. Have you noticed how sometimes when you follow a gut feeling, everything connects? You meet the right person at the right time. The door opens without you forcing it. Money flows from unexpected places. And when you ignore intuition, it feels like swimming upstream, like no matter how hard you push, nothing works. That's because intuition is not just a tool. It is the current itself, carrying you toward the destination. Picture yourself walking in a crowded marketplace. Vendors call out, music plays, people rush past you. Out of nowhere, you feel pulled toward a small stall in the corner. You don't know why. You pause, and the shop owner starts a conversation with you. That conversation leads to a connection, and that connection leads to an opportunity that changes your career, your income, your life. Was that coincidence? No. That was intuition guiding your steps. That was your GPS saying, "Turn left now." And the more you trust it, the louder it becomes. At first, intuition is like a faint radio signal, static, hard to hear. But when you practice listening, when you honor it in small things, its voice grows clearer. Call this person. Don't take that road. Say yes to this. Say no to that. Each time you obey, you strengthen the signal. And just like GPS recalculates when you make a wrong turn, your intuition never abandons you. It gently redirects, quietly whispers again, waits for you to notice. The beauty is that intuition doesn't just lead to money, it leads to right money. Because what is wealth if it comes with regret, stress, or emptiness? Intuition guides you toward abundance that matches your purpose, your joy, your soul's alignment. It doesn't just multiply the number in your bank account, it multiplies your life, your peace, your freedom. So, when Florence Scovel Shinn said intuition points the way, she was handing us the most powerful key to wealth anyone could ask for. Not a complicated formula. Not endless calculations. Just a willingness to trust that inner GPS. To believe that even when logic is blind, intuition sees. To step into the unknown with faith, because the voice inside already knows the road ahead. And maybe, just maybe, that's the secret. Wealth isn't built by chasing harder. It's built by listening deeper. By daring to trust the quiet compass already installed in your soul, pointing the way to the life that was meant for you all along. Imagine for a moment the great inventions and breakthroughs that have shaped our world. The light bulb, the airplane, the automobile, the devices in our hands that connect us across oceans in seconds. Do you think all of these came purely from logic, from a neat calculation on paper? Or do you think something deeper, something unseen, whispered in the minds of these creators before the world even believed it was possible? History doesn't move forward by statistics alone. It moves when someone dares to listen to a voice that others cannot hear. It moves when intuition guides a person to step where reason says there is no path. Thomas Edison didn't simply stumble into the invention of the light bulb because he followed data alone. There were plenty of reasons to quit after his thousands of failed experiments. Logic told him to stop, that it was useless, that gas lamps were enough. But intuition whispered, "Keep going. You're close." He couldn't explain it, but he felt it. And that inner compass kept him moving through the failures until he found the breakthrough that lit up the world. Imagine if he had silenced that whisper. Imagine if he had said, "The numbers don't make sense, I should stop." The world would have remained in darkness longer, and one man's wealth, the wealth of influence, of legacy, of impact, would never have been written into history. Henry Ford faced a similar moment. The world at the time believed in horses, in carriages, in the ways that had always been. If he had surveyed people, if he had asked for opinions, the overwhelming answer would have been, "We want faster horses." Logic and tradition agreed. But something inside Ford refused to accept that. He felt in his bones that a machine could carry men further and faster than a horse ever could. He envisioned a car for the everyday man, not just the wealthy elite. And while others laughed, while logic rolled its eyes, Ford leaned into that intuition. That whisper became the assembly line, the affordable automobile, and eventually one of the greatest fortunes in industrial history. His intuition didn't just multiply his wealth, it changed the wealth of an entire nation, giving millions access to opportunities that had once been unreachable. And then there is the story of the Wright brothers. Two men who had no formal education in aviation, no funding, no powerful investors backing them. All they had was a relentless sense that flight was possible, that man could touch the skies. The world mocked them. The newspapers dismissed them. Experts declared it impossible. Yet their intuition told them otherwise. Can you picture them, standing in the cold winds of Kitty Hawk, adjusting their fragile machine, their hearts pounding with equal parts fear and faith? When their creation finally lifted off the ground, even for seconds they didn't just defy gravity. They defied logic. They followed an inner knowing that wealth is not only about money but about creating what others cannot yet see. That short flight created a legacy worth more than gold, and the wealth of every airline, every aerospace company today, traces back to that moment of intuition. But you don't need to be Edison, Ford, or the Wright brothers to feel this. Think of the entrepreneurs of today. Steve Jobs once said, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition." They somehow already know what you truly want to become. He didn't build Apple by conducting endless focus groups to see what people wanted. He didn't follow trends. He followed visions, ideas that appeared more like whispers from the future than products of the present. When others doubted the need for personal computers in homes, his intuition said otherwise. When the world thought phones were fine as they were, his intuition insisted they could be more. Each time, he trusted that invisible compass, and each time his wealth multiplied. Not just financial wealth but cultural wealth, a kind of influence that reshaped how humanity communicates. Intuition, in history, has always been the silent architect of empires. It doesn't shout from the rooftops. It doesn't come with evidence neatly tied in a bow. It's that tug in the heart, that flash of insight, that dream that won't let go. And those who dare to follow it, despite the laughter, despite the doubts, despite the risks, are the ones who write their names in the story of wealth. Logic is a follower. Intuition is a leader. Logic measures the known. Intuition reaches into the unknown. And wealth, true wealth, is always born in the unknown. Imagine a painter in the Renaissance, standing before a blank canvas. Logic tells him to paint what already exists, what people are used to seeing. But intuition stirs something inside him. Images of the divine, visions of beauty never before captured. He paints not what logic commands but what intuition whispers. Centuries later, his art is priceless. That wealth is more than financial. It is eternal. Now imagine your own life. Think of a moment when you had a choice. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, an investment. On paper, the logical option looked perfect, but your gut twisted. Or maybe the logical choice looked weak, uncertain, while your intuition felt alive with possibility? Did you follow the whisper, or did you silence it? Every fortune built, every empire risen, began with someone daring to listen to that small voice. And every regret we carry often began with ignoring it. Think of the world as a great ocean. Logic is the map that shows you where ships have already sailed. Intuition is the wind that carries you to new shores no map has yet drawn. Explorers didn't discover new lands by clinging to the known. They trusted the wind, the stars, their instincts. And when they arrived, they claimed wealth untold, not just for themselves but for generations to come. Intuition has built fortunes that numbers could never predict. A young investor once said he couldn't explain why he felt drawn to put his money into a small, struggling company. Friends mocked him, advisors warned him, but he followed the inner tug. That company grew to become one of the largest tech giants in the world. His wealth multiplied beyond imagination, not because of charts or graphs, but because of trust in intuition. History whispers the same truth again and again. Those who trust intuition create the future. Those who ignore it remain stuck in the past. And Florence Scovel Shinn understood this so well. She knew that intuition was not just a nice idea, but the very bridge between the spiritual and the material, the unseen and the seen. It is the invisible hand that leads us to wealth instantly, not because money falls from the sky, but because it places us at the right place in the right moment with the right decision. So when you think of Edison lighting up the world, Ford revolutionizing transport, the Wright brothers taking flight, Jobs transforming communication, remember that they all heard the same whisper you hear. The difference was not that they had it and you don't. The difference is that they trusted it. And wealth, true wealth, belongs to those who dare to trust the whisper that points the way long before logic agrees. Think about the last time you felt uneasy before making a decision. Maybe you were about to sign a contract, hand over money, or agree to something that looked perfect on paper, but your stomach tightened, your breath felt heavy, and something inside whispered, "Wait." That is intuition at work, your inner radar, scanning the unseen, picking up signals logic cannot. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that intuition is divine intelligence guiding us. And when you understand this truth, you begin to see how intuition acts as a wealth protector as much as a wealth creator. It is like having an invisible shield that warns you of traps, red flags, and dangers long before your mind has the proof to back it up. Picture yourself standing in an open field at night. The stars are bright, but it is dark on the ground. You have a radar device in your hand. Every so often it beeps, alerting you of something ahead, something invisible to your eyes. That radar gives you a choice. You can change direction and avoid danger, or you can ignore it and walk straight into the trap. That's how intuition works. It is not dramatic. It does not explain itself in long sentences. Simply gives you a signal, a nudge, a knowing. And when it comes to wealth, that radar can save you from decisions that might look golden but are really poison wrapped in glitter. I once knew a man who invested in a business deal that seemed flawless. The numbers lined up, the partners seemed trustworthy, the presentations dazzled. Yet every time he met with them he felt something off. Discomfort. He couldn't put it into words and everyone told him, "Don't be silly. This is a once-in-a-lifetime deal." He ignored his gut and signed. Months later, the business collapsed under fraud, and he lost nearly everything. Afterward, he sat in silence and said words I've heard so many people say. "I knew it, felt it, but I didn't listen." That is the cost of silencing your radar. Now imagine the opposite. A woman I once read about had the chance to buy a property. It didn't look particularly impressive, not in the right location, not the best condition, but something inside told her, "Take it." Logic said no. Friends laughed. But the feeling was so strong that she trusted it. A few years later, the area transformed, businesses moved in, and the property's value skyrocketed. Her intuition had led her straight into abundance, guiding her wealth radar to pick up a signal no one else could detect. That is the gift of trusting the whispers. When Florence spoke about divine intelligence, she knew what she was pointing to. Intuition taps into a field of knowledge far beyond human calculation. Logic can only see what has been recorded, but intuition sees what is becoming. It is like weather radar. You may stand outside in sunshine, but the radar shows the storm already forming miles away. Logic says, the sky is clear, enjoy the day. Intuition says, carry an umbrella because rain is coming. And the one who listens walks home dry, while the other is caught in the storm. Wealth works the same way. On paper, a deal may look sunny, sparkling, full of promise. But your radar picks up the storm. Maybe it's a lie in someone's tone, a detail in their eyes, a silence that feels wrong. Logic shrugs it off, but intuition records it. And the wealth you save by listening could be greater than the wealth you gain by chance. In fact, some of the richest people in history often credit their fortune not to their intelligence, but to their ability to sense when something felt wrong or when something felt exactly right. Warren Buffett, though often associated with logic and numbers, once said that the best investment decisions he made came from staying within what felt right to him, trusting his inner sense more than following the crowd. Richard Branson admitted that much of Virgin's success came from instinct, a gut feeling about people and opportunities. These are not random lucky guesses. They are the radar signals of intuition, wealth's invisible bodyguard. Think of your own life. How many times have you met someone new and instantly felt that they could be trusted? And how many times have you met someone and felt a strange unease, even when they smiled, even when they said all the right words? Later you discovered that your first feeling was right. That is intuition protecting your wealth. Relationships are currency, and the wrong alliance can cost you more than money. It can cost years of your life. Your intuition knows this before your mind does. There is a story of a man who was offered a partnership in a business overseas. The deal was lucrative, the benefits undeniable. Yet something in him kept whispering no. Against advice, he refused. Later, he discovered that the company was entangled in illegal activities, and those who joined faced massive legal consequences. That one decision, guided by radar no one else could see, saved him from ruin. Intuition didn't just protect his wealth. It protected his future. And sometimes intuition doesn't only save you from the wrong deal. It also tells you when to wait. Imagine a hunter in the forest. He hears a sound in the bushes and feels a strong urge to stay still. Logic says, move, pursue, act. But intuition says, wait. A moment later, a predator passes by, and because he trusted the inner pause, his life is spared. Wealth operates the same way. There are moments when the urge to rush is strong, when fear of missing out drives you forward, but your radar whispers, not yet. Those who obey discover that waiting brings something greater than what rushing would have given. Those who ignore often find themselves trapped. The challenge is that intuition rarely justifies itself in the moment. It doesn't say, don't sign this contract because in 6 months the partner will betray you. It simply says, don't. It doesn't say, invest here because in 5 years this will be gold. It simply says, yes. And this lack of explanation frustrates the mind. The mind wants reasons, but intuition gives signals. To trust it requires courage. To follow it requires humility. And to build wealth through it requires faith that the unseen knows more than what is seen. But once you practice trusting this radar, something shifts. You begin to see how often it was right. You start with small things. Choosing a route, calling someone, saying no to an offer. You realize the path it points to brings flow, while the path you resist always brings friction. The more you honor it, the louder it becomes. The more you silence it, the fainter it grows. And over time, you discover that your wealth, your relationships, your opportunities are no longer scattered. They are aligned, protected, multiplied by a guidance you cannot explain but can always trust. So, think of intuition as your wealth radar, a spiritual tool that works silently in the background. Picks up the signals logic misses. It warns you of traps. It highlights treasures. It whispers when to stop, when to go, when to wait. And if you are willing to listen, if you dare to trust even without explanation, you will discover that wealth flows not just from what you chase, but from what you are guided to by a power greater than yourself. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a quiet lake early in the morning. The water is still, like glass, reflecting the sky above. Every detail of the trees, the clouds, even the birds flying overhead, is mirrored perfectly on the surface. Now picture someone picking up a stone and throwing it into the water. Ripples spread across, breaking the reflection, distorting the image until everything looks blurred and chaotic. That's exactly what happens inside us. Intuition is always present, always guiding, but when the waters of our mind are disturbed with fear, doubt, and noise, the reflection is broken. We can't see clearly. We can't hear clearly. And when we cannot hear, we hesitate, overthink, and miss the very signals meant to multiply our wealth. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that intuition works best in silence. It is a spiritual faculty, a divine whisper, and whispers are only heard when the noise around us is quieted. The truth is, intuition does not shout. It never forces itself. It arrives like a feather falling on your shoulder, like a breeze brushing past you, like a sudden knowing that appears out of nowhere. But in today's world we live surrounded by noise. Endless chatter, screens, glowing voices telling us what we should do, what we should want, how we should live. Our logic is bombarded with data, while our intuition patiently waits for us to pause. Wealth flows when we learn to pause. Think about it. How often do we drown out that voice with overthinking? Imagine someone sitting with 2 investment opportunities. Their heart lights up for one, but instead of acting, they pull out calculators, spreadsheets, opinions from friends, endless research. Days pass. Weeks pass. The opportunity slips away. Later, they realize that their first feeling was right all along. The tragedy is not that they didn't know. It's that they did know but refused to trust because the noise of doubt was louder than the whisper of intuition. Intuition thrives in clarity. It is like tuning into a radio station. If you keep twisting the dial, all you hear is static. But when you pause and lock into the right frequency, the music comes through clear and strong. Wealth works in the same way. When your mind is racing with fear, what if I fail? What if I lose? What if people laugh? You cannot hear the music of intuition. But when you breathe, when you still your thoughts, that signal becomes unmistakable. There's a story of a woman who dreamed of starting her own business. Every time she thought about it, her heart raced with excitement, but her mind filled with doubt. She kept telling herself, "It's too risky. I don't have enough experience. What if I fail?" Months turned into years, and her dream stayed locked inside her. One day, while meditating by a river, she let her thoughts quiet down. For the first time in years, she wasn't calculating or worrying. She was simply present. And in that silence, she felt a sudden, undeniable clarity. Do it now. She followed the nudge, started small, and within a few years, her business flourished. What made the difference? Not more logic, not more facts, but the courage to silence the noise and listen to the whisper that had been there all along. Fear and doubt are like thieves that steal wealth before it even arrives. They whisper lies, not the kind of whispers intuition gives, but harsh, loud warnings that are rooted in scarcity. You're not ready. You'll lose everything. Who do you think you are? And because these voices are so loud, we mistake them for truth. But intuition feels different. Doesn't scare you. It excites you. It carries peace, even when the decision looks uncertain. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that when something is right, it comes with a sense of calm assurance. That calm is the key. If it feels forced, pressured, or fearful, it's not intuition, it's noise. There's a man I once read about who was about to purchase a business. Everyone told him it was a smart move. The numbers were strong, the market was solid, and the timing was perfect. But every time he sat quietly, he felt unsettled. He couldn't explain it. He had no proof. Just an inner unease. Finally, he chose not to proceed, even though others mocked him for being foolish. Months later, the business collapsed due to hidden debts that no one had noticed. His logic couldn't have saved him, but his intuition did. And he heard it only because he allowed himself the space to feel it. To strengthen intuition, we must start small. When you feel the urge to call a friend, call them. When you feel nudged to take a different road, take it. When you feel drawn to pick up a book, pick it up. These small acts build trust. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And when it's strong, you can rely on it for bigger things like business decisions, investments, and opportunities that shape your wealth. Intuition doesn't appear suddenly in the big moments. It is practiced in the little ones. Overthinking, however, is the enemy of wealth. It kills the spark before it becomes a flame. Imagine striking a match. The flame appears, but if you blow on it too hard, it dies instantly. Intuition is that spark. It comes as a flash, a sudden knowing, and if you let logic smother it with endless analysis, the flame goes out. How many ideas, inventions, and opportunities have died because someone said, "Let me think about it a little longer," when they already knew in their heart the answer? But trusting intuition doesn't mean recklessness. It means alignment. It means pausing long enough to know whether the energy you feel is fear or clarity. It means taking steps even when you don't see the whole staircase, because your inner compass only ever shows you the next step, never the entire journey. That's why faith is required. That's why courage is rewarded. I want you to picture two people standing at the start of a forest trail. One insists on seeing the entire path before taking a step. The other trusts the lantern in their hand, which only lights a few feet ahead. The first waits, paralyzed. The second walks forward step by step, and eventually reaches the destination. That lantern is your intuition. It will never reveal the entire journey. Doesn't need to. It only needs you to move and trust. Florence believed that intuition was the voice of God, the divine compass that leads us exactly where we are meant to go. When you honor it, you align yourself with abundance because you're no longer fighting against the current, you're flowing with it. And in that flow, wealth multiplies not by force, but by alignment. The right people show up. The right doors open. The right opportunities appear. Not because you chased them, but because you were listening when the whisper said, "This way." So, to silence the noise, to stop overthinking, is to step into wealth. To act quickly when intuition speaks is to show the universe that you trust its guidance. To build that trust in small steps is to prepare yourself for greater leaps. And the more you trust, the more you discover that wealth doesn't come from grinding harder or fearing less, but from listening deeper, acting faster, and aligning with the voice that always knew the way. Imagine standing in front of a locked door. You know without a doubt that behind it lies the very thing you've been praying for. Success, wealth, opportunity. You can feel it, almost taste it. But when you try to open the door, it won't budge. You pull, you push, you try every trick you know, yet it stays firmly shut. Frustration rises in you, and you start to believe maybe it was never meant for you in the first place. But what if I told you the door wasn't locked at all? What if the only thing keeping it shut was the weight of your own doubt, pressing it closed? That is the reality most people live in. They stand before doors of abundance, whispering prayers, begging for opportunities, while all the while holding the very doubts that keep those doors sealed. Faith and action are the keys. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that intuition whispers the way, but it is faith that gives you the courage to act, and action that opens the door. Without faith, the whisper sounds faint, uncertain, like a shadow you dismiss as imagination. Without action, even the loudest whisper turns into regret, because guidance without movement leads nowhere. Faith and action are not separate. They are dance partners, each one incomplete without the other. Faith gives birth to vision, and action turns vision into reality. Think of the great explorers in history. Did Christopher Columbus know exactly what he would find when he set sail westward, defying the common belief that he might fall off the edge of the earth? No. He had no map, no certainty. What he had was faith in a hunch, a sense, an inner knowing that the world was bigger than anyone believed. That faith made him act. Without action, his belief would have been nothing more than words in a journal. Action transformed it into discovery. Wealth, too, is a discovery. It reveals itself to those who are willing to trust their compass and set sail even when the waters look uncertain. Picture a young woman sitting at her desk late at night. She has an idea for a product that could change lives, a solution that came to her in a flash of intuition. Every time she thinks about it, her heart beats faster with excitement. But then the doubts creep in. What if no one buys it? What if I lose money? What if I'm not smart enough to pull this off? Days pass, weeks pass. The idea lingers, haunting her, because she feels the pull but doesn't move. In her silence, someone else on the other side of the world has the same idea, but this person acts. They sketch, they plan, they take small steps, and eventually their idea blossoms into success. The difference between the two is not intelligence, not resources, but action fueled by faith. Faith, however, is not blind. Does not mean ignoring reality. It means trusting that when intuition speaks, it is showing you something beyond what your eyes can see. It means believing that invisible forces are working on your behalf, aligning circumstances, opening paths, bringing people into your life at the right moment. Action then becomes your way of saying, I believe. Without it, faith is like planting a seed and never watering it. You might have the most fertile soil, the strongest seed, but if you don't give it water, it will wither. Action is the water, gives life to the vision. I once read about a man who had an instinct to invest in a small company nobody had heard of. Every logical reason told him it was too risky, yet his intuition nudged him again and again. Finally, he chose to trust it. He put in what little he could, not recklessly, but with faith. Years later, that company grew into a giant, and his small investment multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "It just felt right." That is faith in action. That is the willingness to move even when the outcome is hidden. Fear, on the other hand, paralyzes. It convinces you to wait, to overanalyze, to demand guarantees before moving. But guarantees never come. Life has never handed absolute certainty to anyone. The greatest victories belong to those who act while still trembling. Florence often said, "Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly." That means acting as if it were already done, stepping into the room as though the opportunity is already yours, speaking with the confidence of someone who knows the door will open because in your heart it already has. Let me give you an image. Imagine you are standing at a train station. The train of opportunity arrives, doors open wide, and you feel the pull to get on. But instead of stepping in, you stand frozen, calculating every possible outcome. What if the train takes me somewhere uncomfortable? What if I don't like the destination? What if I can't afford the fare? And while you're thinking, the doors close, the train pulls away, and you're left on the platform watching it disappear into the distance. That's what happens when faith does not meet action. The train doesn't wait for endless analysis. It moves for those willing to step in. Wealth has always favored the bold, not because boldness guarantees success, but because boldness shows trust. When you act boldly, the universe responds. The doors that seemed locked begin to open. The people you need suddenly appear. Resources align. And often, the path that looked impossible becomes effortless once you take the first step. It's like walking across a bridge that seems invisible until your foot touches it, and then, suddenly, step by step, it appears beneath you. But you only see the bridge once you act. There is a story of a farmer who stood by his barren field, praying for rain. Day after day he asked, pleaded, begged the heavens to water his crops. But he never tilled the soil. He never planted the seeds. He never prepared the ground. And so, even if rain came, nothing would grow. Faith without action is like that barren field, hopeful but empty. Action without faith is like planting in the desert, working tirelessly without believing rain will ever come. But when faith and action meet, the ground is ready, the seeds are planted, and the rain arrives in its season, bringing abundance. Your intuition may whisper for you to start writing that book, to call that person, to launch that idea, to step into a new path. Faith says, I believe this guidance is real. Action says, I will move on it now. Together, they unlock doors faster than logic ever could. And when you begin living this way, something powerful happens. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop demanding that the entire staircase be revealed. You stop letting fear sit in the driver's seat. Instead, you trust the inner nudge, you take the step, and you discover that wealth flows not from certainty, but from movement born of trust. Florence's wisdom was simple yet profound. Intuition guides, faith believes, and action creates. If you are willing to listen, trust, and move, you will find that the locked doors of your life swing open effortlessly. Not because they were locked to begin with, but because they were waiting for you to believe enough to turn the handle and walk through. And that brings us to the end of this journey into the power of intuition, faith, and action. If this message sparks something in you, don't just leave it here. Carry it forward. Hit that like button if you felt inspired, and subscribe because every week we share truths that can shift the way you think, act, and build wealth. But let's make this a conversation. What's one moment in your life where you trusted your intuition and it completely changed your path? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Remember, trust your inner voice and step boldly.